Welcome to the Boston Art Podcast. I am Brian Huntress.
I'm Theodora Earthworms.
And this is the episode.
Woo!
Yeah, we're at the gallery,
Yeah.
Assemblage Art Space through Fort Point Art Community. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah.
Or arts program?
Yeah.
With Duane Lucia, who has just curated the show that I am in with artist Walter Tomasino.
Fuck yeah.
We've been meaning to interview actually for a while, but we just didn't. I don't know why. It's just we kind of got away from scheduling interviews for a long time, but you've definitely been on our list to do it for a long time now.
Yeah, this is the third one? Fourth one I've done in like the last 3 months.
Oh, the fourth podcast interview?
Well,
Or just
the last
interviews?
one wasn't a podcast. It was actually a live video.
Oh, awesome.
So we did on the 40th anniversary of Gallery East. So
Wow.
That's awesome.
that was pretty cool. Yeah, because who was it? Jamie Sharafa, who played, he played bass in SSD Control.
Oh yeah, I think I met him at the Film the Flash show.
Yeah, he probably
Yeah, I
was
think-
probably there.
Yeah, it was when I didn't get to the reception, but I got to pop in there. What were you saying though? He was making a film about Gallery East.
No, so the host is Drew Stone.
Mm-hmm.
And so the name of the show is called the New York Hardcore Chronicles.
Mm.
And he basically does this show I want to say once a week. Like he's already done like almost 300 shows. And so for one of the shows, he wanted to do like a Gallery East anniversary. So we did like a 40-year anniversary.
That's
so
crazy.
cool.
Yeah.
Because that was one of the main reasons we wanted to interview you, is because you're like an incredibly active, figure in the arts community now, but you've been a part of the Boston art community for how long? Like a really fucking long time, right?
Since 1979.
So yeah, I guess to us that's a long ass time. So how did that did you grow up in Boston, and how did you get started? Like what in your youth led you to wanting to like do art shows?
So I've always made art,
Mm-hmm.
I started making art like when I was a little kid. Like I think I actually won an art contest when I was like 6 years old or 5 years
Wow.
old.
That's cool.
The Archdiocese used to have this art contest for kids that went to Catholic school.
Yeah.
And, you do some stupid drawing in
Sure.
art class, or art class, whatever they called it. And you would submit it. So I ended up winning, and that was pretty exciting because I got a lot of attention from my relatives and
Yeah.
Oh, right.
especially two relatives in particular who were both professional artists at the time. So,
Wow.
there was a lot of like encouragement to do, to do art. And then along the way, I just kept, we moved from one town to another. So I hooked up with these kids when I was like 8 years old who used to draw comics. We would draw like all these like crazy little comics, and actually like they were like pretty good stories, so started doing that. And then I started doing like in sixth grade sculptures and maps, like topographical maps.
You were drawing them?
Yeah, I would draw them. I would draw them, and then I would like mix paste like you do with your, I didn't have like materials like plaster, so I would mix like wheat or like flour and
Like wheat paste?
Yeah, create like
shit.
wheat paste.
Cool.
Like
Sick.
real gunky wheat paste. And
Yeah.
I'd make like a map of South America with the mountains,
Oh, wow. That's
and,
cool.
And rivers, and I'd carve out like rivers with a pencil, like a dull pencil.
Gotcha.
And then when I got to high school, I started drawing anatomy books. Like I did a lot of anatomy drawings, and then I was also I was a pole vaulter, and I ran track. So I back in those days, this predates like Trans World and Thrasher magazine.
The skate magazines.
Yeah, so like, remember the old skate magazines? So you'd have multiple images.
Oh, I totally.
Yeah, and
like
that's
the panel.
how people learned tricks before there was like video. you
Right.
know.
Oh, wow.
So before skateboard magazines had those, track and field magazines would have those same images. So if you wanted to learn how to long jump, you would see this guy in different various phases of the long jump.
Oh, wow. Like
And-
frame by frame.
Like
Yeah,
sequential
exactly.
comic strip, athletic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Wow.
sick. That's cool.
That's a big
So
thing
that-
in skate photography still.
I made a jump from from drawing to sort of like collage and putting images together where they're sort of moving through the frame of the picture. And then I met Peter McRae
Yeah.
and Al Ford. So Al Ford was the guy who I started Gallery East with.
Okay.
And he was my teacher and he was Peter McRae's teacher at the time. This is in like 1972 when I came to college. So, naturally in college you take as many courses as you can. If you don't, my major was biology, but I was taking art courses and psychology courses. And so I took, I just kind of gravitated more and more toward like art. And then I actually, when I graduated college, I went to work for like 3 years in the fitness industry. I was the manager of a health club.
Oh, cool.
And then I went from there, I went and opened up Gallery East. So that was like in 1979. And that was like a trip because when we first opened up Gallery East, we were disillusioned, like we were going to make money from selling art. And,
Right.
After a year of starving and having to sell all our worldly possessions, I sold everything like jewelry, I sold my stereo, I sold all my albums, I sold my television, I sold anything that we could sell.
That wasn't
to
nailed
make-
down.
Yeah, to make rent, It
Yeah.
was
Where
like-
were you guys living? What kind of place was it?
It was 6,000 5,000 square feet, but it was only $600 a month.
Was it
Oh,
like
that's
a,
cool.
and was it a warehouse?
Yeah, it was a big loft space.
So it was
And
like,
the great thing was that our landlord didn't care that we were living there illegally,
Yeah.
but over here in the Fort Point, most of the landlords were like, most of the people that were living down here were living illegally. So, the landlords would come around and check, and they'd have to hide their beds, and they'd have to hide their clothes, and
right.
it was
Get rid of the
there was
toothbrushes.
there was a certain level of secrecy amongst the people over here in the Fort Point, but over where we were, our landlord didn't give a rat's ass that we were like, living there. Actually, he was amused by what we did. So because we were entrepreneurs, and he came from Russia, like I want to say 1910 or 1905, and
Wow.
and his thing was that you do what you have to do to survive. So and he started this business and ended up owning this building downtown. So we were the recipients of his goodwill, and it was crazy because some nights he'd come in on Monday morning and we had just raised hell like for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Our neighbors were trying to chase us out of the city. We actually had a petition by other artists who tried to close us down
Oh,
because
man.
because we would have like hardcore music, and they would say, "Oh, they're running a disco there." It's like, open your ears, it's not disco music. It's far from being a disco. If we were running a disco, we would be like rolling in money, because
Oh, right.
we'd be selling alcohol, and the thing that we were selling was the thing that they were trying to sell, but we were doing it in a different way. We were more avant-garde than they were. People were making fun of us for having music and art at art openings, But people had been doing music at art openings for already 20 years. Going back to the late 50s, early 60s, that was like the sort of avant-garde scene in New York or, San Francisco, even going back to the Bauhaus, and places in Europe and Germany and in France and in England. People were, there was a lot of cross-pollination between different styles or different mediums, so music and art sort of kind of went together. And I mean, even like in 1980, everybody was into the Talking Heads, but nobody actually realized that the Talking Heads were all art students at RISD, and
Really? They were from Rhode Island?
yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't know if they're from Rhode Island,
But they were
I
going to
know they
RISD.
went there. So one of our board members, Paul
Through Fort
Belfonte,
Point?
he actually was there at the same time that they were.
Oh, really?
That's
Yeah.
cool.
So we started doing, we did, after the first year of Starving, we hooked up with this guy by the name of Bob Ruttman, and he used to build these big steel cellos. Like, he'd build these sculptures you could actually play. They were, they were really weird looking, but they were well done, and he could actually play them. He had an album at the time called the U.S. What was it called? The U.S. Steel Cello Ensemble. And so we hooked up with him, and he was also a painter. So we started doing these multimedia shows, and he had been in New York like in the early 60s, so he was pretty much part of that whole scene with Robert Rauschenberg and I forget some of the other people, like the Andy Warhol people, the Yoko Ono people. And so he kind of, I don't want to say mentored us, but encouraged us to move in that direction because we were able to pay the rent. So everything started looking like, hey.
Was he older?
This is a
He was
good
older
thing.
than you guys?
Al Ford didn't have to go out and drive a taxi to pay his half of the rent, and I didn't have to continue to sell all my worldly possessions.
Right.
So we got to the point where we started doing music, we did theater, we did film, we did performance art, we did poetry, we did all kinds of music. I mean, everything from like world music, we did reggae, we did, we had Eugene Chadbourne come in one time, it's kind of weird because here's this guy who plays an electric rake.
Oh,
Okay,
wow.
like for raking leaves.
Yeah.
He
And,
hooked
like,
it
I
up with a
didn't-
pickup and strings and shit?
Yeah, I didn't know who the hell this guy was. So anyways, we end up booking him, and sure enough, about 30 people showed up for the gig, and who's sitting in the front row is Peter Wolf, so it's like, it was like, there were a lot of people in the audience who were well-known musicians
Wow.
who know who this guy is. And we booked him, I didn't even know who he was, but that's how Galleries was. Galleries was like a pay-to-play place. We made no pretense that if you had money and you wanted to put your artwork up on the walls, you could do it. And the same thing with music. People would come and say, "Can we play here? We heard that this is the place to come and play." And we said, "Sure, this is the guarantee. We want, we take a $50 guarantee, and if you exceed the $50, we split at the door, whatever comes in." And, we were equal partners with all the artists. We needed the guarantee because, you were reserving a night. But it seemed like nobody was balking at guaranteeing $50 back then. It was funny because on the show that I did, that I mentioned before with Drew Stone and Jamie Sharappa, we were talking about Minor Threat. You guys know who Minor Threat is?
Mm-hmm.
So Minor Threat played at the gallery, and we used to charge $3 for people to come to see a show.
Yeah.
So when Minor Threat played, we decided to go up in price to $5, and we were worried that we're not going to get that many people. But it ended
To come
up
see
that-
Minor Threat for $5
Yeah.
at the gallery? That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So it was like 400 people showed up, and
Yeah.
the place was packed wall
Holy
to wall.
shit.
It was just insane. But there were like, we had world famous musicians who would come and play there, and nobody would show up.
Yeah.
It was like just insane. Like this one percussionist, Michael Ulick, who's known all over the world. he said, I want to play there. So whoever was booking him around Boston booked him at Gallery East, and nobody showed up for his gig. I felt really bad for the guy because it took him like about 3 hours to set up all his
Holy
percussion instruments. But then we had, like, you guys know Bad Brains, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Punk
So
band.
Bad Brains showed up one night
No
and
way.
wanted to play. And Al is like, well, they were supposed to play another place downtown, and that place, for some reason, they couldn't play there. Their gig got canceled and that place got closed down. I don't know whether it was a code violation of what. So they needed a place to play. So their friends from Boston show up with them at the gallery, and they want to play there at the last minute. And it's like 6 o'clock, and Al turned around and said, no fucking way. He says, I'm going home to sleep, and you guys aren't going to be able to get the gig done by 9 o'clock, and I always leave here at 9 o'clock. So that was it. But we had, like, for hardcore bands, we had MDC, TSOL, who else? Minor Threat, Double O, Government Issue. So bands would come from outside the city, but most of the bands that played, the hardcore bands like Gangrene, Jerry's Kids, the FUs, DYS, the COs, who else? Boston band.
Forgive my ignorance, but in Minor Threat, it's Henry Rollins' band, right?
No,
That's not him. Who is he?
Henry Rollins was with Black Flag.
Okay, there's probably people listening that just fucking like cringed at me, like, are you fucking serious, you
So
idiot?
Ian Mackay was the sort of the leader of Minor Threat, but
Okay.
it's kind of a strange concept, when you think of leader, like Al Baru was the leader of SSD Control, but Springer was the lead singer, and even though SSD Control seemed to be like a straight edge band, Springer was like anything but he was like the furthest thing from
Tearing it
straight
up,
edge.
right.
Yeah, like he was crazy, still crazy. But but we did we did some pretty intense art shows. I mean, Mark Morrisroe showed his photography there. He's in the Museum of Modern Art.
Wow.
Michael Greco is a pretty well-known photographer in California. He just published a couple of books on punk photography. He showed there. I don't know whether he was an art student at the time. Who else? It's just like all these people who showed there. It was an opportunity for them when nobody else was giving them an opportunity. Dickie Barrett from the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones used to hang out there on a regular basis. I mean, he was like anybody's roadie for any band, and then he started a band before the Boss Tones. What do they call it? Impact Unit, which was a punk, which was a hardcore band, and he's made it pretty well. There were people like, did you know Jake Phelps?
No, I'm not sure.
So Jake Phelps was the, what was his role? Editor of Thrasher magazine. And I always thought of Jake as the guy who's least likely to succeed in life. But he ended up, we interviewed him for the movie, for the all ages film. And he was in New York at the time. We had to go to New York to interview him. We sat in a hotel room, but he was going to the Museum of Modern Art to hang out with Spike Jonze, who made all the skateboard movies. He was being honored at the Museum of Modern Art, but Jake said, he's always took his mother's advice and said, do what it is that you like to do. And he said, all I like to do is skateboard. And that's what he did. And he said skateboarding took him all around the world. So another guy was Michael McDonald. Have you ever read All Souls or Easter Rising?
Oh, yeah, I know the book.
Yeah, so he used to hang out there. So
Wow.
he lived in South Boston. He'd come over the bridge, and whether it was Thayer Street, Thayer Street was where SOA is now.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So that was like,
yeah.
that was another loft area where most that whole area was all musicians. There was some artists there, visual artists, like, Steve Stain was a visual artist. There was some other, Pat Hearn was there. Her band was Bound and Gagged. She ended up opening up a huge gallery in New York, but she was a filmmaker. There was, we had a lot there for a while. When we left Gallery East, Al ended up moving to Thayer Street. And, but yeah, kid like Michael McDonald was 14 years old, and he'd either come over the bridge to go hear music at Thayer Street or come over to Gallery East or, just hang out downtown. But it was safe, parents would come and, with their kids, drop off like 12-year-old kids, 14-year-old kids, and, the gallery was pretty much a straight edge gallery, not because we really cared whether people drank alcohol or did drugs. At that time, it didn't matter. But had we served alcohol, it would have been harder to get permits.
Right. Gotcha.
So we just made the decision. Even our art openings never had alcohol at them.
Yeah.
So people would show up, and it kind of became our moniker that that you were there for the art, not for the alcohol.
Yeah.
And that was that made it also all that more special. And we thought at first that that people were going to have an issue with that, but they didn't have an issue with it. People really embraced the whole art thing for art's sake. It was pretty exciting. We did a couple of, I think, 4 years in a row, we did like something called a symposium and an art festival. One time we did a parade where we actually blocked off all the streets from the MFA to the gallery over in the Leather District.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
People got dressed up in the, like the weirdest stuff. I took a shopping cart and made it into a dragon.
Oh, cool.
And put my daughter inside the shopping cart. And I was on roller skates. My ex-wife was on roller skates. And there was, there were people in vans. There were people in, all kinds of it was very, very New Orleans kind of, it had like a Mardi Gras feel to it. But those were some great events, I mean, it was just, it was a different era, people, there was a lot going on in the city in the 80s. I kind of feel bad for you guys because you don't have a lot of outlets for, what it is that you love to do.
Yeah.
And, maybe I look at your work and I see your work has a certain intensity to it that, that comes sometimes from frustration,
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem with a lot of artists today, that there's not a lot of outlets, and the outlets that exist are like fucking wussy outlets. I mean, like really, like I'm sorry, I think the culture of art in Boston needs to change severely.
Yeah.
It's like it was bad in the late 70s because everybody was sort of reacting against disco, and
They just hated disco? Or they liked
everybody
disco?
looked at disco like it was a soulless endeavor, but I don't really believe that. I think disco was kind of like a springboard from the 60s to the 80s. In a lot of ways. It gave people an opportunity to sort of like, get their rocks off, go do your coke, go to hear your mindless music, go fuck your brains out, go express yourself in a lot of ways. But I think when they hit the wall with that, they started to create something else that was a little bit different. Now, there was a whole group of people that didn't get into the disco scene, that stayed in the rock scene. Obviously there was, some of your Ramones types or your Iggy Pop and Lou Reed types, and then some people who just stayed hardcore, rock and roll. But I think, in the late 70s, a lot of the disco people had it with disco and were starting to, and the great thing about disco is it started in the gay community, and a lot of people, or it was, disco in the gay community was not like it was in the straight community. In the straight community, you'd wear a suit and a tie and you'd go out and you'd be salsaing and all that stuff. In the gay community, it was drag, you know, and the thing about drag is that it's creative, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think all of that kind of came to a head in the 1980s. And then there was a lot of opportunity in the 80s. There were a lot of dive bars. There were a lot of places to play music. There were, you know, there was still, you know, there was still the shitty art scene in Boston. You know, there was still a lot of like people embracing abstract expression and design type work. You know, nobody ever wanted to tell a story, and I don't know, maybe the story ended up being told in comic books and you know, some other medium, you know, filmmaking or you know, I just don't see it today. I just don't see a lot of figurative. I don't see a lot of like storytelling. I see a lot of kitschy, you know, design stuff that, you know, looks good in a office building or looks good in, you know, like I could never show my work in 90% of the places that, you know, send out what they call, you know, RFPs, you know, or, you know, submission proposals. Yeah, come and submit your work. You know, my work would never get into that show. It just, I couldn't show, you know, like the Atlantic Wharf. You know, we always have opportunities to show there, but I couldn't show my work, you know, especially my erotic work. You know, that stuff is just like, you know, it's like, I'm not going to show that anywhere. Maybe if somebody has an erotic show in a gallery, I might submit it. I submitted 5 pieces to the FPAC show this winter, and I thought, you know, maybe they might not like it or somebody might say something, but, you know, it was fine. You know, in our gallery at 249, there's, you know, there's at least half a dozen artists like myself who show, you know, some sort of risque work.
Yeah.
But for the most part, the culture in Boston, you know, the art culture is, it feeds on itself. There's this sort of like negative feedback. I call it negative feedback. It's feedback that artists start to think by what's being accepted and what's being shown in galleries and what's being, you know, marketed to corporate America. You know, there's some people out there that are adventurous. I remember when Al Ford, he did this whole series of my ex-wife when she was pregnant with my daughter, and he had nudes, pregnant nudes, and there was this one guy who had a real estate company, and he actually bought this big piece. It was, you know, it's like twice the size of that.
Wow.
With my ex-wife.
It was like 8 feet tall or something? Like
No,
just
it wasn't 8 feet tall, it was 6 feet tall, but it was like, you know, it was like 10 feet wide.
holy shit.
And he put it behind his desk in his office. But you rarely see anything like that. I mean, you know, for example, the piece that I submitted for the floating sculpture, which was on that site on the Summer Street Bridge, is where 50 people died, okay, because a trolley went into the water because somebody fell asleep or left the bridge open, or either that or the conductor, the guy who was conducting the trolley, ended up not seeing the light, but he went through the fence when the bridge was open, and the trolley went into the water, and 50 people died. So it's, you know, it happened in 1916, and there's no plaque there. There's nothing to commemorate the fact that this event happened.
Yeah.
So like Guernica, or like, you know, some of the memorials, there's a Holocaust memorial downtown. There's a Hungarian memorial downtown. There's the Irish famine downtown. So why not put something like
the
that?
Boston Massacre site.
Yeah.
Even.
So I figured I'm going to do a sculpture where I'm going to do a sinking trolley with people actually like trying to get out of the trolley from inside.
Yeah.
And the design I had for the trolley was very historically accurate, so that would have been the real work. And, you know, you and I were going to do the painting together. And, you know, it was like they were mortified by only one person on the jury, like, liked it, you know,
Really?
from what I understand, you
Wow.
know. And I said, so I haven't heard anything about the sculptures. What did they think of mine? And she goes, oh, that would have never gotten accepted. You know, this
man.
was the former executive director. You know, it's like, okay, you know, that tells me where the culture is right now with, you know, with both, you know, Boston and, you know, jury selections and that kind of thing.
It feels
But-
like most of the opportunities out there are really like palatable. Like the things that they accept are things that don't really challenge the viewer, I guess. Like more creative ideas end up being costly for the artist because they're a risk to put out there in terms of sales or to shows.
Yeah, I think too, like, it's kind of interesting, the parallels between talking about the beginning of Gallery East when all these people, like, fucking hated you guys or, like, wanted to call the police on you or get you kicked out of your building. And, like, I'm kind of interested to hear how you feel like that relates to the kind of decorative corporate artwork being promoted and sold right now. Do you feel like people who are trying to basically farm from the status quo or that demand for really thematically subdued work, do you feel like that relates to when you started Gallery East and the way that the culture was at the time?
You know, I'm gonna steal a quote from Ella Baril, you know, which is be truthful, and even, you know, one of the mantras from the you know, from the hardcore days was, you know, be truthful to yourself, you know, and it's, I mean, if you're going to paint what other people want you to paint, then that's stupid.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's really, I wouldn't
That's a
waste
good
my
way to put it,
fucking
yeah.
time. You know, I'd rather be, if I'm going to paint what somebody else wants me to paint, I'm probably going to try to be a stockbroker or something where,
Right.
you know, money becomes so important to me because I don't really feel like I'm expressing myself.
Yeah.
So I think what I do, and I do it for me, I don't really care whether I ever have a show. You know, I put a couple of pieces in a show each year, you know, and sometimes I put my subliminal message in there, you know, to people. Like I put this one erotic piece that nobody even got. It went so fucking far over their head. But it was like little kids' blocks, and I put them all together on a string, and the words that I put in there, like cum dump, and, you know, like, you know, just, you know, really vulgar
Yeah.
words on there, and it was just like nobody got it, but it hung in the gallery for like a month and a half, which is really, really funny. But yeah, you know, I enjoy putting it into shows. I actually have a show that's like about design. Like you would know about it because like a lot of people don't really understand what Sanshin is, you know, and they don't understand the whole concept of. So I'll spell it out because
For me, okay.
Yeah.
Because you guys get it.
Theo and
Okay, for
I
sure.
have done this for years, but
Yeah.
so Sanshin is what's kind of like a moving meditation.
Okay.
And really what you're doing is you're constantly, when you practice, you're measuring your body image, like where your body is in space, how far your reach is, how far your step goes, you know, the direction you're looking at, you know, where your center is. So I have this whole show that's based on that, and it's based on the concept of the golden ratio and the icosahedron. So if you take your body and you divide it in half, your coronal plane, which is your upper and lower body, and then your sagittal plane, which is your right and left, and then that's your coronal plane, and your transverse plane, they all intersect about 2 inches below your belly button, and that's, in Japanese, that's called your hara. And so in martial arts, almost all martial arts is based on the concept of hara, or what they call a belly art. So like when you put all these planes together, and for me it's design, but it's also on another level of design. I don't want to dismiss people who do design stuff as being untruthful or mindless. Like there's really good stuff out there that I think, design stuff that's really pretty cool. Like I really like Michael Bork's stuff, even though he spent most of his life as, selling his work to corporate America in interior design. I just like the way it feels. It feels truthful to me.
Why do you think corporate America wants that shit? Like, when did this trend start of corporate America wanting big ass abstracts?
It's funny. My daughter went to Brooklyn College to study painting, and when she got there, she said, "I already know how to paint." So she changed her major from painting to art history and documentary filmmaking. But it was at Brooklyn College where abstract expression actually got its start.
That's the New York School movement, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
So
that's like Rothko and Pollock was associated with them too.
Even before them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
but around that same time, those were the outgrowth of people. But it never died off because people didn't want to do what you do. Which is struggle with the figure. It's
right.
Like you're working the figure. And you're looking. I watch when you do your circle and the eyes and the nose and the. It's kind of like, for me, I don't really have to think a lot about movement because I do movement every day.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's everything that I do. I wake up in the morning and I do my san shin and I study movement.
Yeah.
So, and then years of drawing anatomy drawings and studying, like I said, the whole, these multiple image, track and field skateboard type things. It gave me an understanding of movement that a lot of people sometimes don't really have. They may be disconnected. For you, it's skateboarding. When you skateboard, there's a certain amount of mechanics that go into that. The same as like, somebody who does ballet or somebody who's in touch with their movement. I think it's a little bit more. It gives anatomy. When somebody does a portrait or somebody does an anatomy drawing or somebody does, let's say, figures and comic art, for example, it gives them another level of communication. You communicate with your eyes, you communicate with your ears, you communicate with your voice, you also communicate with your movement. So, people read bodies. Sometimes I can see somebody coming down the street. I can't even see their face, but I know the way they're moving. I know who that is. So I think that gets translated into painting, into drawing, and even for some people into abstract expression, So like...
Yeah, there could definitely be a lot of movement associated with the aesthetics of, like, I don't know.
The application of color and one color interacting with another color, or even the stroke or the thickness. Like I see, obviously in some of these, one of my favorite pieces that you did is this one here. This is real abstract, but it's also there's so much, there's a lot of movement in it, and life. There's just a lot of truth in that. So. I just, even though some of the more realistic ones, like those there, the double one in the head, most people would gravitate toward that. I see almost like a merging of abstract and figurative in that, and that's probably what I like the most about your paintings, your art, is that, there's a great deal of emotion, especially in the eyes, You look at the eyes and you just see some of these are just so powerful.
Thank you.
This guy here, that's, even though it's abstract, even though it's fragmented almost, it still, there's a lot of feeling there.
I think the eyes as a theme I really enjoy, just because, I don't know, I feel like it's it's like, what am I trying to say? One, it was one of the first things I learned how to draw probably. And two, I feel like it's so much of people's identity, at least to me, is in your eyes. And it's, probably the first thing you're looking at when you're looking at a person up close. And like, I don't know, people's eyes betray a lot of what they're actually thinking. Kind of like, like a basic formula of a creepy face would be someone like smiling, but their eyes are not smiling.
Yep.
Creepy. You know what I mean? Or like maybe they're not smiling, but their eyes look friendly. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't know. Like there's just basic
See, like,
examples of.
when I look at Al Ford's work and his paintings, I see the same thing in the body.
Oh, wow.
Because all his stuff was figurative, and his stuff is a little bit like Marc Chagall. The bodies are sort of floating off the canvas, not
really abstract.
bound by gravity,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
He was kind of like a proto-surrealist, right? Or like kind of more like a expressive surrealist, I guess you could say.
Yeah, but not. Your stuff is more realistic than his.
Than Chagall.
His
Right.
is more like, representational of his style.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I look at your stuff, they still have 2 ears and 2 eyes and 1 mouth and
True.
1 nose. So, like my work, there might be 5 eyes over here or 10 eyes over here. Sometimes I've worked with giving people like 5 ears, or a couple of mouths. It's, why be bound by, the number, the actual, way that
Anatomical
people
convention.
Yeah.
look. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know whether I steal that from Picasso or whether it's something that I feel,
Yeah.
but it's what I'm expressing, and I'm not letting somebody else express it for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I feel is the tragedy in art, and people who want to make art, like it's almost like they're limited, they're handicapped by doing still lifes.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody can go to a building and fucking draw a building. Like I could look out here, and the worst is the people that take a photograph and then go home and they draw from the photograph. It's like, put a gun in my head already. It's like, kill me. But, I sometimes do this. Like
Sure.
I've done the library, or I've done like, loft buildings, or sometimes I'll get stuck and I don't know what to do, and I'll just like draw that shelf over there and these windows,
Yeah.
just because, it'll give me an idea on perspective and depth and composition and scale and all that stuff. But for the most part, 95% of what I draw and what I paint comes out of my own head. And I call, I'm brutal when it comes to judging. When I have a conversation with other artists, like, you or the guy I share my space with, Tony, I'm brutal. I'm really brutal. I'll walk by somebody's painting and fucking bootlegger. I'll call them bootleggers because they steal other people's work.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've never
call
heard that
them
expression.
Bootleggers because, they actually like Shepard Fairey. Everybody likes Shepard
right.
Fairey. He's a fucking bootlegger. He takes people's photographs and then he recomposes. It's not even he's not even doing collage. I mean, there's one thing taking somebody's photograph, like Kevin Porter, was a friend of mine. Kevin used to have an alternative space called Media Workshop. Kevin is a really, overlooked collage artist. And that's all he does. He just does collage, and he does it in the old school where he uses an X-Acto blade, and his work is very based in social justice issues. But that's not bootleg. That's taking language and reassembling it. What I call bootleg is when somebody tries to create something that looks like something else, or they take, like Shepard Fairey takes somebody's photograph and then he plays with it in Photoshop and redecorates it with like some little, frame around the edge, and that's so nonsensical to me.
Yeah.
But he knows he can make money from it. It's kind of like what Andy Warhol did, but Andy Warhol could do other
He could
things.
fucking draw.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He was a good draftsman.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely Shepard Fairey or whatever, he definitely would not exist without the pop art movement too. He's almost like a grandchild of Andy Warhol.
It's
Yeah.
funny too.
Yeah.
Didn't he have a huge lawsuit with the
He did.
the Obama Hope portrait? Like
Exactly.
he lost all the profit from that because it was somebody else's photograph.
Yep.
He did get in trouble because I think he was taken to court from it, and he stood his ground, from what I know, and said, "No, I didn't. Like, this is my photo." And then I think it was eventually proven in court that he lied
That's
in
so
court.
shitty.
Like,
What about the photographer?
I don't know. The
like-
dude probably fucking panicked and was like, "Oh,
No.
I didn't."
Yeah,
Anyway,
but hey, look, at the end of the day, you got to look at your work and say, that's my work. I created that. Nobody else did that.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it's like my granddaughter came in here, she's 5 years old, and she says, I don't like his work. And she goes over there, she goes, I don't like his, she points to Brian's work, and she said, I don't like his work. It's scary. It's like your work. Okay, then she walks over here and she looks
To Walter's.
at Walter's, and she goes, I like his work. He's got a lot of detail in his work. And she goes, it's like my work. I have detail in my work.
I love that.
Yeah. But,
She's 5?
ever since she was a little kid, she'd take a full sheet of paper and she'd cover the whole paper.
Yeah.
She wouldn't
That's good.
leave any part of it uncolored or undrawn, and now her sister, just the opposite. She'll draw in one little corner,
Oh wow.
and then the rest of it's all blank. So that's real. There's really something going on there. In terms of what somebody's personal issues are as a kid. That's where art therapy becomes a powerful tool. Because you can get kids to express themselves, and it's almost like, when you ask, if you have a bunch of kids in a class and you tell them to ki is a yell in karate, 90% of them can't yell. You take
Yeah.
them to the playground, they can yell, but in a controlled situation where you're asking them to do something, they can't yell. But the real creative kids, they'll yell, and they can scale it. To the point where if you want them to yell longer, you want them to yell shorter, you want them to yell louder or scream, they can. The real creative kids can do, have much more range.
Yeah.
Wow. What a
So I'm
crazy.
pretty excited to show Walter's work too.
Yeah,
I
has
gotta say.
his work been shown many times before?
Walter's got a long. I showed his work at Gallery East in 1980.
Nice.
Incredible.
So we've been friends for that period of time. I've always offered to represent him, put his work up on Gallery East. Walter went to art school. He went to film school. He's a really good animator. He's got an incredible collection of Looney Tunes Hummels in his
cool.
house. All the stuff from Looney Tunes. Anyway, his films. He's done like 3 films. One of them's like an award-winning film, and it deals with the whole AIDS issue back. I think he did the film in 1993. So it's kind of like that was when the whole AIDS issue, from like the mid 80s, I want to say, early 80s, all the way through the 90s, was really powerful. And his film is awesome. I really like it because it really it really captures the whole scene of social behavior, but it does it in a cartoon sense where his figures in the film are more abstract than this, more like this. I'd say more like this style. But the color scheme is still the same. You can see his color scheme is pretty much the same across the board. Stuff he's doing now is just too insane to show. You know, I mean, I had to take down the ones that were up there, you know, not because...
Oh, yeah, with like the crucifixion shit and people getting killed and stuff.
Yeah, it was torture.
It was torture images.
Torture, you know, so like, it's not that I didn't want to show the theme, it's because I thought the ceilings were too high for the work, you know, because the figures were only that tall.
Yeah.
So it didn't really, you know, this at least to scale fills the wall. You know, like when you walk in here, you can look at these figures, you know, and say, they do the space justice. I don't really like this gallery that much because, you know, I don't know why I like it. Probably because the windows are too big and too bright. But then again, I guess, you know, people can see it from outside and looking in.
Yeah, someone was just trying to come in a few minutes ago, if you noticed. It's
I had
kind of
20
funny.
people in here today.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it was
Wow.
a good turnout.
Awesome.
That's exciting.
But yeah, Walter's, the stuff he's doing now is even more insane than the torture stuff. You know, it's all meth mothers and meth heads and, you know, just like, you know, he's real negative on the whole art thing, you know. But if he likes your work, he gets, you know, he tells you he likes it.
You know, it's one thing I really wanted to hear more about that I think our listeners would be really interested in too, is like we have a theme of really, with past interviews, of trying to get into, I guess, people's origins with art and with DIY and stuff. And I'm really interested to hear about how the culture was and what, I guess, why you even felt like you should do Gallery East stuff. And like before, you said it started in '79.
Yep.
So I guess I'm wondering, like, what did your day-to-day like, or your outlook on art or your behaviors look like in like '77 and '78, like leading up to this, I guess, you know, genesis of this whole.
So the do-it-yourself is a real important part of all of it, you know, because, I mean, if you wanted to get printing done in 1960s or 1970s, you had to take your printing to a printer.
Right.
And he did it for you.
Yeah.
But then Xerox came out and Copy Cops and all these, you know, these copy places that would cost, you know, 5 cents to get an 8.5 by 11 copy, you know. And it's funny, but that was real important to the do-it-yourself thing. The other part of it was do-it-yourself was also an opportunity to express yourself. You know, that you could design your own poster and you could say what your artwork was all about. And the cost of printing came down in price. You know, you didn't really need a typesetter. You could do it all yourself. So people started doing, you know, 11 by 17s. They started doing 17 by 22, you know, sizes, standard size paper that you could go into Copy Cops and you could get, you know, maybe 200 of them for a fairly decent price. And then the next part of do-it-yourself was wallpaper paste, you know, and pasting it up around the city, you know, let people know. There was no internet back then.
So would you just go out in the middle of the day with a bucket of wheat paste?
No, you would go out at night because people, you know, if you got
would
caught,
arrest you.
It was like graffiti back then.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, some of the stuff that we did was like, you know, we would take mailboxes and completely cover a mailbox in posters, which was like a federal offense because it's, you know,
Federal property or postal property, yeah.
You know, there would be a construction site on Newbury Street with, you know, like, you know, how they have construction.
Oh, the
sites.
big walls blocking off the public.
Yeah, they have like a plywood wall.
Yeah.
We would plaster that whole wall with posters. So you would go down Newbury Street and you would see like all these Gallery East posters or all these posters of a particular artist. You know, we'd put them up on telephone poles. I mean, there's still posters that are up on poles that have been there for like 40 years.
Really?
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you know where those ones are specifically? Like, do you go back and photograph them or anything like that?
I'm trying to think of the last one that I saw, you know.
That must be pretty mind blowing. I think too. Like what I'm wondering too is like, you're like, you know, like a young man with your friends in the city and just like fucking it up. But like, how did you like? Was a lot of that just like? Did you guys think you were like? I guess I'm trying to think like, how did it occur to you to start wheat pasting? Like you're like, I have an idea. Let's take 200 of these fucking pieces of paper and glue them to
Well,
the.
you know, a lot of us grew up in the. You know, a lot of us grew up in the 50s and 60s where people still wallpapered their houses, you know,
Oh,
in their
yeah.
apartments.
Oh.
So we knew about how to wallpaper. You know?
Right.
So that was
Oh.
not the bad part of it.
That's a
And
bit of a
then-
lost skill, isn't it?
And then the other part of it was, as we started learning about art, and we learned about like poster art from like the late 1800s, all of Paris, all of London, all of Germany, all of France, all of Spain, all of Italy, all had these incredibly well-designed Art Nouveau and Art Deco posters posted up all over the city, advertising theater, advertising musicals, advertising nightclubs like the Moulin Rouge, advertising art events, you know, and whatnot. So we were just really copying something that had been done before us, you know, and implementing the, you know, the tools that we had, you know, which was like on the cheap. You could go to Copy Cops and you could get 100 copies made. And at one point, you know, we couldn't even afford the 5 cents, so we made quarters.
Right. Yeah. Like
And
we've
the
been
other
promoting
thing,
with.
the
with
other
the
thing
show.
about quarters is you could hand them out at nightclubs,
Oh,
There you go.
yeah.
real easy. You know, nobody wants to take this home.
Right. A big 8.5
You
by
know, what's
11's
your
a pain in the
choice?
ass.
You know, it's
right.
like a business card. Like nobody had business cards. Business cards were like expensive back then.
Yeah.
So you could make up these quarters from one sheet. So this would cost 5 cents, 5 cents for 4 of these, or 5 cents for one of those.
Right.
So do-it-yourself became sort of like an economical thing as well as a creative thing. And, you know, it was like everybody was pushing the creative end of it, you know, to out-poster each other in the city. Like, you know, for Gallery East, we pushed the limits, I got to tell
Right.
you.
You guys.
There were
you guys
poles
won.
that, as far up as we could, you know, stand
You
on
could
each other's
shimmy up
shoulders.
the thing. Right.
We brought ladders, you know, to do the whole pole. I mean,
Yeah.
you see kids nowadays, you know, when you talk about like the whole hip hop scene,
Yeah.
you know, like
Graffiti.
everybody that's done graffiti. I mean, you going down the highway and you're
Yeah.
saying, how the hell did that
People
guy get
climbing up
there?
on fucking metal bridges above the
Yeah.
highway.
Oh.
Above. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just insane. You know, I mean, you need to be like a second story man or have some skills with,
Or just be
you know,
like all.
with rappelling.
Or just fucking drunk and climbing up fucking I-beam up the the side of a bridge. Probably a lot of them.
Yeah.
I think it's crazy though, because I think that shit's such an exciting thing to think about. Because like I think a lot of our listeners are probably either younger than us or maybe in their 30s or something. And a lot of people, like you were saying, like the art scene of today that we've grown up with is so much different
Yeah.
than like the 70s and 80s. And I think a lot of people may not even like I think like whatever example you guys got and knowing that you could do that and you could go fucking blast, you know, posters all over the city or this or that. A lot of people that are our age don't even like, obviously it's illegal, so you don't want to like get fucking caught, you know, vandalizing shit. But a lot of people don't really know that they can do that.
Yeah.
Or they don't know that they can just make their own fucking gallery, or they can just have a show. You know what I mean? And it's like really revolutionary for a lot of small communities and a lot of people to do that for the first time, you know? So I guess it's always like, I don't even know where the fuck I'm going with this, but
Well, you know, again, it's economics. In 1980, there were a lot of galleries that were popping up that were, you know, do-it-yourself galleries. I mean, people were opening up storefronts everywhere. I mean, even like, I want to say in the early 2000s, you know, there were like still galleries opening up, and they were like the third generation, they knew of Gallery East, or they knew of certain media workshop, or some of the other alternative spaces that were having multimedia shows and artwork. Most of the multimedia places were artist lofts that were supplementing their rent by having shows, whether it was, we used to call them sometimes rent parties, where you'd have a couple of bands play. And then before you know it, instead of having one band play a month to pay your rent, you put in a couple of bands, and now you were getting a little bit of extra money to pay for canvas, to pay for paints, to pay for video, to pay for
posters,
amp, speaker replacement in your amp. It became, it became a necessity almost to be an entrepreneur. Not, it wasn't a luxury. Nowadays, it's some people just say, I'd rather wait tables, I'd rather do this, I'd rather do that. It was easier to be a starving artist in the 80s. It's a lot harder to be a starving artist today. I got to say that. I'm pretty fortunate because I've got an extended family that I live with who make it possible for me. And they got in the ground floor back in the early 80s, with buying into an artist building. But I don't really, this whole artist housing thing, it's still not affordable to a lot of artists.
Yeah.
I mean, I talk to artists who are paying over $1,500 a month to have an affordable art studio, and they're having to work 40 to 50 hours a week just to pay the rent on that, and then come home, and how much energy do you have to put into your art?
Basically none.
Nothing, And so what it's doing is it's creating what I call a welfare art economy, where they're being given opportunities, which means they're kind of being entitled. They're only being considered if they're creating a certain style of work that matches with what the powers to be in the status quo want them to paint, or are giving them opportunities to paint. If you're in artist housing, then there should be a real market economy. There should be a real and I have this conversation with my daughter. My daughter's she went from documentary filmmaking to making reality TV shows.
Wow.
And she's worked on some really interesting reality TV shows. It's still not at the level of documentary filmmaking she'd like it to be, but at least she's doing filmmaking and production. And she could come home, or she works on contracts, so that at the end of a contract, she could take off 2 months and paint and create and do that kind of stuff, because she's made enough money from doing her, production stuff. Like she's done, she did Project Runway All Stars.
Oh, no way.
She just did this one with, what's the drag queen from RuPaul? Trixie?
Oh, yeah.
Trixie. So she just did, Trixie opened up a hotel in Palm Springs, where my daughter lives. And my daughter doesn't want to travel anymore because she can't take her dog with her on the plane. So she'll only do jobs that she can drive to. And the person who was the director on Project Runway All Stars was doing this show with Trixie, and they were opening up a hotel in Palm Springs.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the process of building the hotel, and then once the hotel opens up, then the process of welcoming guests to the hotel. So she worked 2 seasons on that, but she gets to take a good amount of time off so she can paint and do her other work.
Yeah.
I think, but that's a real creative economy, meaning that she's making money because somebody bought the show to show on television, so that, the money coming through is real money. It's not grant money. It's not from the National Endowment. It's not from the Mass Cultural Council. And that's the difference really between Gallery East and a lot of what you got today. We made money from art,
Yeah.
you know, and Minor Threat kept visual artists getting an opportunity to show the work, because the visual artists didn't sell a lot of work back then. You know, if you're showing your stuff and you've got a lot of truth in your work, people may not like it because the status quo hasn't programmed them to like your work, so they're not necessarily going to reach in their pocket and buy the work. Basquiat was selling work for $5.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't really get popular until later on, until, you know, his work started becoming popular. And I mean, now his work is ridiculous, you know.
Yeah, he's like a
$100
fucking
million.
immortal icon.
Yeah. But the point is that, you know, and he's on the upper end of like the out there, you know, the avant-garde. You know, he's on the upper end of, you know, the non-status quo artist. But then there's, you know, if you look at the pyramid, he's up here. All these people down here still need opportunity. They don't have a lot of money to promote themselves. They don't have a lot of opportunity from the status quo to show their work. Then they're not going to walk into a gallery and say, will you show my work? Because the gallery is going to say, well, we don't show that kind of work. Or we have a 3-year waiting list. Or we have, you know, they got every excuse not to show their work.
Or like $1,500 annual dues.
Yeah, but why not have places that are subsidized by people like Minor Threat or people like, you know, who are a little bit wealthier, you know.
Yeah.
You know, maybe there's an artist who has a good amount of money that can rent the gallery for a month and subsidize a whole bunch of other artists. That's who Robert Rauschenberg. I met Robert Rauschenberg in 1981 or 1980, and you know, he said to me, "I love what you guys are doing here." He said, "I did the same thing in the 60s. I bought a building when I started selling paintings, and I moved all my friends in the building." And he said, some of them were good, but some of them weren't so good. He said, some of them went on to be fairly well-known artists. He says, but it gave everybody a chance.
Yeah.
And that's what I think, you know, needs to exist in order to create a real, you know, bona fide market value creative economy. Because then people will change their mind. Mm-hmm. You know, the people will change their mind about what they like. You know, they'll come in. I don't have any money, but I bought 3 of your pieces so far today.
I appreciate it.
You know,
thank you.
It's like I've been collecting artist work. I mean, I had an artist, Eric Cluin, he kept moving from place to place, and his sketchbooks were in the basement of a building that kept getting flooded. So rather than his sketchbooks, and there was 65 sketchbooks, I said, I'll pay you sell me all your sketchbooks. And if you ever need them, you can come and get them. I'll be your library.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You know, it gave him an opportunity, you know, and you know, I've been doing that since I realized that, you know, artists need sometimes the wealth needs to get spread around.
Mm.
And, you know, that's another thing about the 1980s. I think everybody had a little, and the people that had a little bit more shared it with the people who had a little.
Yeah.
You know, there was always something. I don't know about today. The jury's out where, you know, the sort of, you know, what kind of community exists out there. You know, I'm not sure. I think the people that are in charge are actually doing you know, injustice to the people that are you know, that are out there needing the opportunities
That they should be serving. I noticed you said earlier that the money coming in was real money as opposed to grant or like from the government or a cultural council. Could you talk a little bit more about, I guess, real money versus something given through some kind of institution and which is better?
So, it's not which is better. You need both.
Mm-hmm.
At least from what I understand, in the nonprofit world, I just stepped down from being president of a museum. And when I came on board the museum, they couldn't even pay they couldn't pay any of their bills. Wow. They had a sugar daddy basically. And, that person was kicking money into.
Oh, like a wealthy donor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not realistic. What's realistic is that when people come in the door, they need to make a donation.
Yeah.
If they're going to look at the art, they're taking something from looking at the art. Therefore, they need to make a donation. If it's $5 or if it's $100, I don't care what it is, but they need to pony up something.
Yeah.
We're giving them something, they're giving us something. If they don't like it, they can say it sucks and I don't want to pay for it. That's fine. I can deal with that. But for the most part, if you've got 100 people coming in the door and 70% of them are contributing to a donation box, that's a real economy because there's an exchange there.
Yeah.
You're entertaining. When the 20 people that came in here today were missed opportunities for us because there was no donation box here. So that's what I mean about revenue stream. We need to keep that. Now,
is there a reason there isn't one in this gallery? Just for no
because
particular reason?
I've only been here 2 months. And
oh, gotcha. Right.
Believe me, there's going to be there.
Oh,
because
cool.
In the museum, we would take anywhere from $500 to $800 a month just in the donation box.
The door.
Shit. Wow.
Just the door donations?
Yeah.
Wow.
People coming in, some people leave 10, some people leave 5, some people leave 20, some people throw coins in there.
Right.
It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, at the end of the month, if you keep your traffic high, you're going to keep your donation box high. That's real, that's real revenue. The other revenue is selling a painting. That you need to, I don't want to say, like, I did a show at the last 2 shows I did and made money, okay, Phil and Flash Photography, because Phil has a certain brand that I know has a certain dollar value. Now, I have to haggle with him, because he's your typical artist, he can't get his homework done, so I have to haggle with him on the one end, but I work with him to put out there in an exhibit what we think the public is going to like, Now, we obviously want to make a statement, but, Phil's work is like, I don't know how to describe it. It's very popular, and it's very niche, sort of niche, although, mostly people from Boston are going to buy it. It cost me $6,000 to frame his show.
Oh, wow.
Now, you have to invest in order to make money. So I had the gut feeling that these are the numbers I have to come up with to break even. The bottom line is you always want to break even, but we ended up selling another $8,000 on top of that so that we paid our nut and we made a little bit of money for him and a little bit of money for me. That's real economy, sales. The other part is, having a buyer that really likes your work. Like, I like your work, but I'm not the buyer that you need. You need somebody that's going to jump. I'm getting in on the ground. I'm buying.
I appreciate it.
I'm buying property that's swampland right now. But eventually your work is going to be thousands of dollars.
Hey, let's hope.
Like my friend Artem in New York. I went, when I went to Artem's show, the first show he had, and I saw his work. I couldn't really afford a lot of stuff, but he had one painting there that was $1,000. And I said, okay, I'll buy that painting. Can you sell it to me over time? So I gave him 3 payments over, I think it was like a 6-month period, and I got the painting and walked home with the painting afterwards. And today, that painting's worth about $8,000 because that's what his paintings sell for. Actually, I might even jack it up to over $10,000 because there's so many people that want that painting because he's taken that painting and he's parlayed it into a narrative in 10 different directions that still have a lot to do with his visionary style of future sort of post-apocalyptic world.
Yeah.
And, elephants, always people love elephants, and he's got like these 3 elephants moving in different directions with temples on top of them. But the point is, I always like, if I as a buyer, and this is like sort of like the relationship between buyer and artist. I think as a buyer, I'm responsible for helping move your career ahead.
That's an interesting
if
way
I
to think
like
about it.
your work and I invest in your work, it's going to give you a stepping stone to the next place that you need to go to experience the real economy. Not to get a handout, not to get a grant, not for somebody to give you an apartment because you're an artist and you qualify for it. That's great. But the ultimate is to try to keep moving it's incremental. Like Drew Stone, when Drew Stone came to me, I interviewed Drew Stone for a project, much like you're doing here, called the Boston Punk Rock's Oral History Project.
Wow, very similar.
And Drew said, when we were interviewing him, why don't you guys make a movie out of this? A documentary. So, being the numbers person I am, I decided to do the math and see where we could go with this. And Drew had a little bit of a background. He actually did Run DMC's first music video. He had won like a couple of ESPYs, for his stunt motorcycle films. But he had invested a lot of money in DVDs, and the DVD market went south.
Oh, shit.
So he ended up selling all his DVDs for a penny on the dollar.
Oh.
And, ended up, pretty much down in the dumps. So this was an important project for him. So I figured, okay, Drew's got talent. We've got an idea. I've got a little bit of money. And we made all the right moves, and his father was actually Drew's dad. Arnie Stone won an Academy Award for a film that he did with Mel Brooks. And his father had a saying, keep the mo going, so we kept looking at each other and reminding each other of the mo, it's in motion, just keep everything moving, keep it moving, the stepping stone that I was talking about.
Yeah.
If I need to cross that river, so I step on this, take the rock behind me, put it over this, step on that, keep the mo going.
Right.
So I think we invested probably about $30,000 in the film. Before we paid to have the DVDs printed, we had already sold enough to pay for at least a break-even point. And then we sold the DVDs. We also put on a show where we brought back 8 bands, 6 of them from the old days. So we called it the Gallery East Reunion Show. We made money there. We ended up selling streaming rights. We made money there. So we kept moving it incrementally forward. So we made back our money easily, which most independent films end up losing money because they don't manage their money the right way. The first thing they do is they go out and spend a lot of money on equipment and expenses. So we kept the expenses down. I was the person in charge of that, which I'm pretty fiscally responsible and cheap is a good way of putting it. And we just moved it. So since then, since the All Ages film, Drew has done a film about Michael Alago, who basically was signed Metallica and a bunch of other bands. He was really good friends with Cyndi Lauper and Nina Simone. So he did a story about Michael Alago's life. He did the New York Hardcore Chronicles. He's got a new one coming out called Jews and the Blues. But the point is that, we went from this project that was really just a documentary about our do-it-yourself scene that we had between 1981 and 1984, and he parlayed it into a bunch of other things. The show that he's doing now, the New York Hardcore Chronicles, which is on on his platform, is just it's real money. He's not getting grants. He's not, he has investors, but they invest because they know he's going to turn a profit and give them back some of the money. So that's kind of the entrepreneurial mentality that existed in the sort of the underground back in the 80s. And I'm not sure whether that same mentality is there today. I think it is. I think it's on a different level. I think the internet kind of changes that. Whether you're promoting yourself on, Facebook, but you still need the truthful product. You still need the product that's the real thing. I mean, you could sell shit. People sell pet rocks all the time. But I think if you're, if you really are making art and you really love your art and you want to try to market it, I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of options, but I still think you got to have more options than are being made available today. Back then we had a lot of options. We had fanzines, we had college radio, we had, postering, we had shows. There's not that many shows anymore. Nobody does fanzines because people are afraid of print media. Just like they were afraid of printing DVDs. Would I do DVDs again? Yeah, probably, but I wouldn't.
Probably not a run of 10,000 of them.
No, we only did 2,000.
Right. Oh,
we did 2,000, and we still have. I still have a couple. Drew still has a couple. That we keep aside for, special people that want to buy them. I still keep them up on our website if people want them, access to them, but I don't really try to push them too much. They're on Amazon if people want to buy them, but I don't push them too much. But I'm actually thinking of doing something with the newspaper business, like an art newspaper, that kind of thing. But a print one, I don't really. I think we're running out of steam with the internet because I think it's, there's a certain amount of expectation, like lacking creative bandwidth, so to speak, that you could get in other forms, like still the jury's out on that one, though. Don't quote me 100%. Quote myself. But radio, people have more or less given up on radio. That's kind of like, sad, because college radio in Boston back in the 80s was like, it was killer. There was ERS, ZBC, MBR, FNX, WBCN. I mean, everybody was, radio was the way to get out to people. And it's back to what we were talking about in the original beginning of the conversation, people communicating on different levels. You're hearing the art, you're seeing the art, you're feeling the art, you're moving in the art. How many people go out dancing anymore?
Yeah.
It's just...
maybe not a ton.
Yeah.
Or a lot.
That's the thing, too, that I think is kind of a problem about the scene right now that is really hard to kind of navigate, is that when you're talking about these things like printing zines or handing them out to people at events or having events in the first place, like when you talk about the Boston scene right now, like everybody that I know follows each other on Instagram, but I've never seen any of those motherfuckers in the same room. And that's how you make connections, and that's how you think of new ideas, and that's how you kind of just like shooting the shit with people and meeting somebody that knows something you don't know. Like, they don't tell you how to be an entrepreneur in art school, really. They tell you how to paint. And then you have to figure the rest out on your own. But if you're just in your room doing your own thing and posting online and never actually going to an event or hosting an event, when does that happen? Like, when do you get into that next level?
I met this kid who came to the museum. He was 16 years old. The kid was a marketing genius.
Yeah.
He never leaves his room. Him and his friends don't hang out. They think it's boring. It's like, this is a fucking world we live in. I mean, think about it. You know,
Yeah.
it's like people would rather sit in their house and peck on their computer as opposed to actually go out there. And I'm guilty of it as the next one. My daughter had to yell at me the other day. She said, "Dad, you need to come out here and see me. You need to make a commitment. You know, let's do what we like to do best." You know, we paint together. We, hang out and drive and enjoy life. You know, but I think that sometimes we're so, we painted ourselves into a corner with the digital stuff. It's just, whether we're on our phone, whether we're on our tablet, whether we're on our computer, it's worse than it's ever been. It used to be that we were fearing the TV,
Yeah.
We feared two things in the 1970s, TV and Big Brother. And Big Brother and the TV got turned into the same thing. Now it's called algorithms online.
Yeah.
They fused into one.
You are being led by the nose. And, people can't think outside the box. So what happens is, when we talk about real economy versus fake economy, it's like people will only embrace what they're familiar with. But if they can think outside the box, they can get a little bit more familiar with, with what's not happening. I knew interesting thing was when COVID hit, my son, who's a martial artist, but he's also, he's a smart kid, and Tony, who's a musician, I said to the two of them, I said, this thing's serious. You guys need to start thinking outside the box and how you're going to make money. And sure enough, both of them have done better during COVID than they
before.
did.
I know a lot of people that happened with.
Because they were able to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And, for me, it was actually a blessing because I got all my classes canceled. So I went on, unemployment, and I ended up making more money on unemployment than I did when I was actually working. But, as soon as everything came back to life, I was able to, come back to life with it. And, I think so for organizations like this organization, one of the pitfalls that, I see FPAC having fallen into is what a lot of artists have fallen into, which is, the grant-driven business model. And I think the grant-driven business, not even the MFA, look at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. For years, they let people walk in and give a contribution if they wanted to, but it was more or less for free. 2 years ago, that all changed. Well, maybe it was before COVID, 3 years ago. That all changed. Now they charge people to get in because they have to.
Right.
The grants aren't there anymore. The donors aren't there anymore. The endowments, maybe getting tapped into. All that stuff. So you really need, one of the things that FPAC doesn't have is paid programming. We need paid programming. We need the minor threat plunked down to $5 because at the end of the day, everybody walks home with $500.
Yeah.
Minor threat was happier than pigs in shit when they came up to Boston and they went home with $500.
Yeah.
Because it paid for their expenses. And it was real money. It wasn't like somebody gave them a handout. And they felt good about it themselves because their music got them the money. It wasn't like they got the money because they were entitled to it because they were an artist. They got the money because they performed. They gave their fans, they were true to themselves. The marketing was solid. every bit of the, entrepreneurial pursuit was there. And I think that that's what artists have to wake up to,
This is a really interesting perspective because, like, we've talked to a lot of people in the last, year or so that are very, no disrespect to them, but are very focused on grants and getting funding and their money that way. And I mean, me and Theo have talked about this a lot, but we've almost felt stupid for not trying to do that. We don't know how the fuck to get grants, for one, but two, we've
Join
been
the club.
Yeah,
I'm running an organization that's grant driven, and I'm I feel like I have my thumb up my ass half the time. It's what do I do? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? What do I apply for? I think once in my whole life, I've gotten a grant, but for the most part, it's always been about making money. My 5-year-old granddaughter made over $600 last year returning Coke bottles.
Good for her.
That's
and
sick.
she knows.
That's
I said,
a
we're going
grind.
to work. She goes, okay, I don't want to carry bags. I said, no, you have to carry the bags. You're going to get the money. And it's funny because every once in a while, I'll let her spend her money. And, she'll buy something she'll buy a cookie that she doesn't like. And I said, see, you just spent your money, and now you have to work again to get back the money that you spent on the cookie that you didn't like. So she's starting to understand, value of money versus what you put into it, your work. The person I probably learned the most from about taking your art and turning it into, your life's profession is Peter McRae, because I helped Peter when he, first moved into his first school down at Plymouth. And, we were doing what we loved to do, which was our martial art. And it was every bit as much an art as, let's say, painting or, sculpture, music, whatever. And, it was just really about hard work, and I mentioned before, the whole idea of Mo, keeping the motion going. As long as you're cleaning your dojo and you're there and you're teaching the classes and you're working hard to, and you're truthful for what you're doing. And Peter and I were like oil and vinegar, literally his philosophy and my philosophy were completely different. I was outside the box art. He was inside the box Republican. Yeah. But we had the same, work ethic, and we had the same sort of idea about making money.
Yeah.
That if you take your life, what you love to do, and I said that about Jake Phelps too, if you take what you love to do and you just keep working it and you keep the mo going, you're going to end up making money at it. And that's real money. That's not entitlement. That's not waiting for a handout. That's not waiting for the sugar daddy donor to come along. Yeah. And maybe today, Brian, your work's going to be $400, but the next show it's going to be $600 to $800, and then the next show after that it's going to be maybe $1,500, and then before you know it, your prices are going to be up there. But it's incremental, and I think that's. I think that people will walk through the door and start to appreciate, your work. I believe they will. I think the same with Walter. He doesn't really care, whether he sells his work. He just wants to keep painting. Him and I are a lot alike. But I think for you, you're young, and you have a lot of opportunity ahead of yourself to keep making it work. I mean, not many people can sculpt and paint the way that you can paint, and with the freedom and expression that you do. And this is certain, I look at this thing here. This is like classical sculpture. It really is. I mean, it doesn't. I don't know if you know Harold Tovish or people like that, but that guy taught at Boston University and had a ton of shows back in the '80s, and your work's better than his,
Wow.
And even in a classic sense, you have a lot of classic lines in your work, and I think that that's real important, to bend, sort of like to bend you know, the narrative a little bit more. You know, you can start out with something like this and arrive at this one here. You know, to me, this fucking thing is genius.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I mean, a lot of these, you know, like this is pretty intense too.
With the blown out mouth and eye.
This is beyond.
Thank you.
It's beyond. But yeah, you know, and again, I think that people will recognize your work as you mature.
Does that one have real teeth?
It's
Everybody asks that question.
That's awesome. Yeah, they look exactly like real teeth, but it's actually, I don't know what it is exactly, but I think they're you've seen
The thing in your room.
I have another
Yeah.
one that I have it's like some kind of dental equipment from a fucking, I think they use them in dentistry schools.
Well, you
as
know
like
the
fake
original
teeth,
dentists were jewelers, right?
What is it? No.
The original dentists were jewelers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So in their own right, they were artists. And so what they figured out in the, you know, like the 1840s, 1830s, was how to adhere enamel to metal. So, and that was a jewelry, you know, that was a jewelry making process, which became, you know, were they Fabergé eggs or something?
Yeah.
You know, like those
Oh, no
kind of
shit.
things.
Wow.
Huh.
Yeah, that's fucking crazy. Huh. That's an interesting thing to think about too, because like I have used a lot of teeth in a lot of these pieces as a motif, but
This was the one. Remember we were both selling art in the same store, and you dropped off on a different day than me, and I came in. And this guy was like, "Have you seen this guy's sculpture? Like it's some goth kid."
oh, this fucking
You'd love
piece
it.
was in that store, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was your
Oh,
piece.
we went
He's like,
through.
he uses teeth. It's this goth kid I know. I was
Yeah.
like, I know that person.
Yeah, we went through a whole fucking snafu with this bullshit consignment shop. It was stupid. It
I
was a
love the
horrible
way you
situation.
use this, the plastering.
Yeah.
netting.
Oh yeah, thank you. That's just really, really useful with clay work because you can use it literally the exact same way. Because it ends up looking like an aesthetic contribution, like it's this interesting net texture, but it's actually just as structurally important to the piece too. Because I don't use, like a lot of people, I don't use, these aren't necessarily ceramics or terracotta, so I think they might be in a chemical sense, technically ceramic clay, but it's self-curing. So I don't have to fire any of it. And it's not as strong as a terracotta or ceramic, but it is strong in archival. But that means that I can put whatever the fuck I wanted to it, which is awesome. Because
You know, it was funny. My
you know.
granddaughter came in here. She picked this piece up, and as
Oh,
much
really?
as she doesn't like your work, she was walking around with it like this.
Oh.
It's a doll.
It is doll-like.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Makes for an eerie visual.
Right. Yeah, that I did. I was inspired by trying to use like a doll-like format for a long time. You can kind of see it with this one here. This is actually a recreation of a piece I made in 2015, where I made it out of a wooden doll, but I recreated the wood base myself, while the other one was like just a, you know, like a grandma's knick-knack kind of wood doll that I repurposed, but I like the one I made better.
I just love the use of sheetrock skewers.
Oh, yeah.
You used it in this one, too.
Oh, yeah, I did, didn't I?
Yeah. The one, too.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then this one here, I finally figured out that this was the support wire for the whole head.
Yeah, pretty much.
And what did you use for, like, did you use, like, that same molding?
No, that's
Stuff.
actually, it's like a cement, like grout thing
Okay.
that's filled. It's mainly just there to keep the head in the can and to make it, I don't know, get some weight to the base so it isn't too top heavy. But it was a really a big experimental piece with trying to, I don't know, make something new, but also make something. A huge learning curve with sculpture with me was learning how to make sculptures that are structurally sound. You know, like it sounds like stupid to say, but like
No.
it was a really big learning curve because I've made many sculptures that disintegrated.
We had an artist. I used to share studio with her, but she's now in New York. Deb Roth. She used to make these fabric. She'd come in here and do this whole room over.
Wow.
She's done Macworld. She's done There's, what do you call it, Thanksgiving Day football games, halftimes, all these kind of, crazy designs.
Wow.
We did a festival together, but she did the whole gallery, and originally when she started out, her stuff would fall apart. But it was stretched fabric.
Wow.
And then she got to the point where when she moved to New York, she was able to hire, these Korean seamstress stitchers who would actually make the product really good. And then she would, she would learn a lot about like the support elements to it, stands and all that. So she's been all over the world. I think she's sold her company, made a lot of money selling her company. But
That's
she's
fucking
still
awesome.
she's still pretty well respected all over the place because of her her sculptures.
Is she the one you were telling us about that did a fabric mural on the side of the building in Southie?
No, that was another girl. She did that over here
up on the Bridge Street, right? Yeah.
So they tore a building down,
Mm-hmm.
and on the side of the building, you could see where the stairs from the building that they tore down is still impressed on the building, like the brick and the
stairs.
cement.
Yeah.
So what she did was she took fabric and hung it down from the roof, and it would go down to that stair, down to this stair, down to this stair, down to this stair, down to that stair. So her sculpture ended up looking like a staircase, which was pretty cool. She was really good. She was, I don't know what happened to her. Lost track of her.
Interesting. Yeah, it's fucking, it's pretty crazy just thinking about the lineage and cultural contributions of so many artists in such a big city. Well, in a small city, but.
There was nothing like the 80s in Boston, I mean, the 80s was a period of time where, it was adventurous for a lot of people in a lot of different areas, whether it was filmmaking, photography, music, theater a little bit, dance a little bit. There was people were doing different things. I don't see a lot of, the other part of it is the streets used to talk. The streets talked because of the postering that was out on the streets. It brought, Jane Jacobs is a famous person who commented on urban design, and she wrote a book called The Death and Life of the Great American Cities. And one thing that was very central to her idea, she said that cities were being ruined by urban renewal and they were becoming too sanitized. And one of the things that was a central concept to her philosophy was eyes on the street. And, the eyes on the street are now gone. The street is the internet. The street is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. The street is, how many characters can you put in Twitter? 21 or some ridiculous number?
Right, yeah, very, very little.
Yeah. You could put a picture up.
Yeah.
You could put, really, how do what's missing? Your poster next to my poster out in the street. It's like, what do you see when you go to the skateboard park? You see everybody's graffiti. It's energy.
Yeah.
It does.
It's like a different type of energy that people don't get. It's not like, this is showcasing your work and Walter's work, and you get to see, a little bit more, sort of like sophistication to it. But the real stuff is out in the street. It's like all these little these little stickers that people are putting up. Sometimes you'll go by a pole and you'll see 20 stickers or 50 stickers on a pole.
Yeah.
Where you posted up in Cambridge, the alley in Central
alley,
Square. How many times does that alley change?
Yeah.
It's probably got a
hundreds
few
times in a
inches of
year.
paint on the
Yeah.
wall, probably. It's probably shrunk the alley a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was also wondering, why do you think that cities like New York and Los Angeles in the 60s and 70s and 80s have probably fucking thousands of movies about them, and like all of these like lionized mythical histories about these cities. But it seems like there's like, with the art and culture in Boston specifically from those same eras, doesn't seem to be remembered the same way. You know what I mean?
Because Boston has a stiff upper lip and a stick up its ass. That's just the way it is. You know, everybody like judges everything by some guy who was like in charge of the art department over at Harvard back in 1890s, who invented the color wheel, but nobody knows what art he ever created.
Right. And he was probably on the original directors of the MFA.
Exactly. Denton something Denton. I forget the guy's name. I don't even want to remember. There's been some like really heavies. I mean, if you look at Hyman Bloom and
he's from Boston?
Hyman Bloom, yeah.
Seriously? I didn't know that. No shit.
He grew up in the West End.
Really?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I saw his show at the MFA a couple years ago, and it was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
So I had no fucking idea it was from Boston.
So Hyman Bloom, Jack Levine, they sort of were courted by this guy at Harvard, but they broke away and they started studying with this other guy who was a teacher in a community center, basically a nobody. But he taught them how to paint and draw without looking. Without using models, to paint and draw from your brain, using what vision you saw in your third eye, let's say, whatever, your mind's eye. And they created this school called the Boston Expressionist School. And there were people that came out of that school, I think maybe Jonathan Imber, Henry Schwartz. Al Ford studied with Henry Schwartz, but Al Ford got a different he got a different background from like a guy down in Provincetown, and was more into the Picasso, Chagall, Van Gogh, Rouault type design. You would like Rouault. Your work's a lot like Rouault. It's like sort of like Rouault and Francis Bacon. Those people. Your kind of your style, Basquiat.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look them up.
Yeah, but there hasn't really been, other than landscape artists and, portrait artists like John Singer Sargent and, John Singleton Copley, and then, some other people. I mean, there really hasn't been sort of a real Boston avant-garde.
Yeah.
In that respect.
Right.
Well,
it's sort of like unfamiliar.
Yeah.
It's like art is like a language, that if it's kind of like, infiltrating, bringing 5,000 people here speaking Chinese. They'll all hang out together because they speak Chinese and nobody else understands them. And eventually they'll be cornered into a little community called Chinatown, and they'll stay there and hang out with each other. But the culture, the avant-garde culture doesn't necessarily filter into the mainstream so much. People don't understand it. Even my 5-year-old granddaughter, she might understand the detail and might appreciate the colors and all that, but she can't come to this level because she hasn't had the world experience that you've had, that I've had, that us as grown-ups. She doesn't understand the emotional part of it, what it's like to have 10 shots of Novocaine and feel like your mouth is exploding.
Right. Or to get your whole fucking life blown up or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What were you going to say before, Theo?
I was just going to say, geographically, too, I feel like when you meet people that are making art like that around here, a lot of them say they're going to New York. Or that you should go to New York.
Yeah,
like,
people
fuck
leave.
Boston, basically. Which makes me sad. Like, this is where you're from,
Why do you think it is that people leave?
Because New York's more exciting. It's like New York is, there's still dirty streets and posters on the streets and rundown areas. I mean, it's getting to the point where it's almost as sanitized as Boston, but, because there are so many cultures there, you're getting so many different influences. I wanted to move, about 10 years ago, I wanted to move to Elizabeth, New Jersey, because Elizabeth, New Jersey was, a couple of stops away from New York City. You could take a train directly into Penn Station. So it had a lot of New York influence, but it was a Hispanic ghetto, basically, or not. I don't want to say a ghetto, but it was an immigrant neighborhood. So you got a lot of cultures coming to this one place where people don't have a lot of money. So what do they have to do to get ahead? If I can't get the job that you got, and there's only so many jobs, I got to be creative to get something else. And that's the creative process, I think, in an immigrant community. I mean, there's so many. I look at the history of the West End, and, guys like Hyman Bloom, Joseph E. Levine, Lawrence Burke, who started Berklee College of Music. I mean, wow. There's so many people. Leonard Nimoy. All these people came from this Jewish ghetto, this immigrant neighborhood, and they competed with each other on a level that at some point the competition starts to become saturated. And instead of, changing and you want to be, let's say you want to be an actor and there's no roles for you, you go somewhere else. And that's what happens. You go to where you think the opportunity is. And in the art world, there's no bigger opportunity than in New York City. Yeah. Nowhere in the world. And I think that it's still, the streets in New York still talk. There's still, I love walking around New York City and taking photographs of, just postering. And you'll see some little abandoned storefront, and within, a week, that whole doorway is all decorated, whether it's posters, painting, graffiti. It's all on top of each other, like I was saying before about the skate park. Yeah. It changes so quickly. The people who don't have license somewhere else have the license on the street. Yeah. And so that gives them an opportunity to express themselves, to practice, to perform. It's almost like, artists are exhibitionists in some ways. Some, do well in a gallery, some do better out in the street. Yeah.
Yeah, and with the added element of the internet, it does kind of obscure those two things, because like TV and Big Brother merging, the streets and the galleries are kind of becoming this like mutant third child of the two on the internet, and it maybe isn't as good as the two things, because like I've known hundreds of artists throughout the years that are, either my peers or older than me that, never really became DIY and like trying to distribute things on their own and promote themselves, and they never learned or never got into a kind of gallery thing. And that's obviously okay if that isn't what you want and that isn't your path, but it's actually bad if you're really unhappy. Like if you're fucking dissatisfied with that and you're like, I don't know what the fuck to do, I don't know where I belong, like where should my art go, who's gonna care, what if I die tomorrow, is this going to a landfill? And like a lot of people don't really, like I think that there becomes this kind of anguish with the arts and with a lot of, I'm hesitating to even say young people, because I don't even think it's only young people. I think there's a lot of older people that are experiencing the same thing, where there's a very, maybe it's geographical, and maybe if we were all from fucking New York, maybe we would feel this feeling less.
Well, I think another thing too about this idea that a lot of people have, like basically everybody has, about you have to have like your Instagram followers up, you have to have your TikTok, you have to be putting it out there on the internet.
Posting content all day, every day.
Who doesn't log on to Instagram and see like 10,000 amazing things every day? Like makeup, hair tutorials, like paintings, cars, like it's selling stuff to you all the time. Like it's like a meme to get an invite to a show on Facebook. Like, it's ignore, because you get it all the time. It's
Yeah,
oversaturated.
you don't care,
But
yeah.
if someone you actually know, like if you're working at a grocery store and your friend has an art show coming up, you might fucking go, because there's a community there. There's a relationship to that person. It's not just another thing out of the 20,000 people you follow on that one platform out of 5.
Mm.
You know
Well,
what I
that's,
mean?
that's the culture that has to change in FPAC, because FPAC was founded on community.
Yeah.
And, the opportunity is there. We just need to take advantage of the opportunity. Again, there's kind of like in the art world, there's always this woe is me because I didn't get a grant, or I didn't get a show, or I didn't get, or my neighborhood's being overwhelmed by, Seaport. It's funny, I sent Tony an ad for the Echelon, which is down here, this new place that's opening up. And I can't imagine that you could not, it has to be all billionaires.
Yeah.
I don't even
What is
think
it, an
millionaires.
apartment building, condos or something?
Yeah, it's like these condos with this pool, it's got a basketball court, it's got everything is like the best that it could be. I feel like it's like fucking Trump Towers, and that's
They are like that.
That's kind of like the standard, but artists can get overwhelmed like that. And I think that, sometimes when you're out in the streets and you see the dirty streets, or you go to you go to a party and people are dancing, it's like everything's evened out. There's no more strata, there's no more classism. The classes have all been evened out. Another thing that Peter and I used to talk about, it's like in the dojo, everybody's equal. Even if you're black belt or, master or white belt, it's like the black belts and the masters all started out as white belts. So they all have that experience. And then the other experience they have is everybody sweats, and everybody has physical limitations because of whether it's their age, their physical abilities, their injuries, all of that. So, sometimes
They didn't inherit a black belt.
Yeah.
Or they weren't given their skills through a grant.
Yeah, well, now that's that's like a big thing in colleges. They're finding out that all these Ivy League schools, or these not even Ivy League schools. Now it's even black universities, or if your parents went there, you got a better chance of getting in than somebody else. There's a certain entitlement that that comes along. I remember my son's friends in high school. He was supposed to go to Harvard because his father and mother went to Harvard, and their father and mother went to Harvard. And he wanted to rebel, so he went to Stanford. But, still, it's like there's that kind of entitlement is even worse now, I think. And it'd be nice, to get back to some dirty streets where people are actually doing street performances, like Sidewalk Sam. He was the epitome of street performer, but there were more people than him. There was Billy Barnum, there was Brother Blue, you go to Cambridge and there were people on every corner playing music. There was something going on. I don't even know, are the chess players still there in Harvard Square? Do they
Yeah, they are.
Not a ton, I think. I do think they have a few boards over by that tobacco shop or something, or across from.
Isn't it a bank or something?
Yeah, I think it's a bank, or it's across from the big brick Harvard wall.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
where the coop was, that was like an area that was not an entrance. It wasn't used. And at night, when the place closed down, there were always people performing there.
Oh yeah.
There were like dive bars everywhere. Like at Gallery East, we could go to Cantones, we could go to the Blue Diner, we could go to the Channel, we could go to, any one of 5 clubs within a 5-block area.
Yeah.
You could go to Kenmore Square. There were like 8 or 9 clubs in Kenmore Square. There was the Rat, there was Lucifer, there was Katie's, there was, the 15 Lansdowne Street, whatever it became, Spit, Bill's Bar. There were all these bars. There were, brothers, fathers. There was, just, I'd have to say there were probably like 100 clubs then. And every musician got an opportunity to play in one of these places, because nobody would be able to play City Winery. Can you play City Winery?
No, I probably couldn't play any of these fucking places.
I
could barely play the Middle East, probably.
I don't know anybody from this area that can actually play, City Winery.
Yeah, those venues that are at like wineries or the performers that are in there. I know a few people that run in circuits like that, and it's like you have to be really, really clean. Like it's a very like, it's hard to even describe it, but the people that I know that have been in those circles are like working like insanely fucking hard to be welcomed into those venues.
They got agents.
Yeah, sure.
That's what they got.
Yeah.
What you don't have, they have, which is an agent who's taken a cut of the action.
Right.
If the agent gets you into that place and, they're, I don't know. Like I remember there was a guy that played at my birthday party who was down here for a while, Otmar Liebert. Okay, and Otmar's got like about 5 gold albums now, maybe more than that by this time. But he started out playing with this band called Red, and nobody liked them. They were rock and roll, but he was trained as a classical guitarist. So he decided that, he's going to move out west, and he was back to playing his music, but at the same time he needed money, so he was selling dictionaries door to door or something like that. But finally, he ended up hitting, with this style called Nouveau Flamenco, and his music is beautiful. I mean, it's nothing like what he used to play.
Yeah.
But he's wicked famous and doing really well, and he's got he's sort of like got a gimmick with it that it's like kind of some Buddhist music, something like that. I don't know if it's a gimmick or it's just an extension of his lifestyle, that he's embraced.
Cool.
But, having an agent is a big part of it because the agents know which door to knock on for you. Brian, your work is really good, but we can't get you in there, but we can get you here.
Yeah.
So, and then eventually, again, it's back to the Mo.
Yeah.
We get you in a bunch of places, and then finally you start to get a following and a popularity, and now the places that you couldn't get into before are now starting to let you come in.
Yeah.
Beastie Boys, what's his name? Adam Yauch came to Galleries, wanted to book a gig at Galleries. I sat with him and I said, I don't have any time openings during the times that you want, but it's nice meeting you and I'll see you again. They were a hardcore band back then. Who knew that like 5 years later he's going to start singing rap and ended up becoming like bigger than, than anybody.
Right. Yeah. Like an iconic act. Yeah.
But he's pretty classic of like a lot of New York hardcore bands that have reinvented themselves or kept the Mo going. I think one of the things about, it's funny, in 1980 to 1984, there wasn't much of a hardcore music scene. If you looked at like the country and what the hardcore centers were, DC, Boston, LA, a little bit in Texas, the Midwest, some Chicago, San Francisco, but New York was like behind.
Philly too, right?
Philly, yeah. New York was behind, but now New York is where, the most hardcore is. It's the biggest hardcore scene anywhere. So, but I think the reason for that is because New York still has a good amount of places to play. Maybe some places like, A7 or, the Ritz or some of the bigger venues, CBGBs are gone. There's still a lot of small places to play. And, the boroughs, people are used to traveling to the boroughs. So they'll, most of the people, the boroughs are like the suburbs were for Gallery East. You know, the kids would come from Quincy or come from Hanover or come from the North Shore or Worcester or Springfield.
Yeah.
Like Jay Macy's taking a bus from wherever he comes from out in Springfield. You know, what was his name of his band? I forget his hardcore band, but he went on to Dinosaur Jr.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
You
wow.
know, so,
Huh.
but you know, there's got to be opportunity for young people. If there's not, then it's going to die. You know, it's going to shrivel up and end up like Seaport,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
nobody gets an opportunity.
Yeah, it is a pretty dark thing, because like I know, like Theo knows, like we know infinite people that are talented artists or like charismatic people or like artists, musicians, like people who are like making like amazing contributions to the culture in general, but are so most people I know would think about the prospect of being in a gallery, their work in a gallery, the same as them becoming a fucking billionaire.
Yeah.
Like it's like pretty much for most people do not think that that's possible, and that doesn't really. I feel like that I feel like it creates a fuck it culture where a lot of people are like, what, like why would I ever even consider like contributing to like the gallery world if like I'm just as likely to, you know, like have a drink with Elon Musk or something, you know. And like I don't know, I've felt like that before too, but I think I have a way different opinion about galleries now than I did maybe even a few years ago. But I think like I don't know, man. I don't know like why that happened or whose fault that is, but I think regardless of how we got to that point, I think it's creating a lot of people who would be really fucking amazing and known artists, just not, just for whatever reason, and that maybe who the fuck knows what they're doing instead.
Poor
You know?
working class neighborhoods
Yeah.
are the incubators for the middle class. Because people move incrementally. You start
Yeah.
out as, you know, you come here as an immigrant, let's say, you start out in a poor family and you end up, you know, taking a job, getting a little bit more education than your parents, or taking a job where you're making a little bit more money than your parents, and you keep working your way up, and you can go as far as you want, as far as your ambition will take you. I think, you know, with art, it's the same thing. The problem with downtown Boston, and I use the word sanitized when I probably should use the word homogenized. It's become too expensive to have opportunities for artists. So what the BPDA, the BRA, the Boston Redevelopment Authority, is trying to do is mitigate those problems by creating welfare opportunities for these artists.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that's entirely a bad thing, but I don't think it's a good thing either. You know, because it's
Kind
not
of a Band-Aid.
Yeah. And, you know, that's going back to what Jane Jacobs saying about the death of the great American cities. You've taken away the incubator. So there's no opportunity for replacing the poor people with more poor people, replacing the working class with more working class, replacing the artists who get opportunities with more artists, because there's only so many welfare opportunities.
Yeah.
The welfare pot, the welfare money tree is only so much.
That's so fucked too, because people, instead of like entering into entrepreneurial competition, enter into grant competition and,
Exactly.
and fighting and using this energy to get.
Exactly. They're groveling for crumbs.
That's fucked.
And if you're going to grovel for crumbs in a market economy, you're going to share it a lot more than if you're groveling for crumbs in a grant economy, in a welfare economy. Seriously.
Yeah.
Like,
No, you're
look
right.
at it. You know, it's like all you need to do is look at housing projects.
Yeah.
Why do they have so much crime? Because the same people live there. It's all poor people.
Yeah.
You know, it's all people that need to scam to make up for what they're not getting from a minimum wage job or from a, let's say, food stamps and welfare or unemployment, whatever's subsidizing, whatever their revenue stream is. Now, if you take poor people and put them with rich people, now there's going to be a little bit more sharing of self-esteem, a little bit more sharing of opportunities, a little bit more sharing of education and communication and socialization. I think that's what you see in New York. Maybe it's disappearing, I don't know, but it's certainly not happening in Boston.
Yeah.
I see the opportunities in Boston. Michelle Wu is trying to change that. She wants to build more housing. She wants to build more affordable housing. I think it's a pipe dream, unless they're going to make the commitment to social infrastructure, things that make a difference. You want to start changing this city? Change the education in this city. Start making it mandatory to teach music, to teach art, not make it feel like that's the first thing that's going to be cut because of some STEM crock of shit bullshit. That stuff is nonsense. Science, technology, English, and math. I could teach kids math by teaching them Sanchin. I could teach them math by teaching them how to make money. That's really, you can solve all the math problems. You can teach STEM by kids walking around the neighborhood and picking up trash.
Yeah.
Literally. You can teach them you can teach STEM, teaching them carpentry, teaching them build floating sculptures, teaching them art.
Yeah.
All of that stuff can be taught in art,
Wallpaper.
The golden ratio, that's math.
Yeah.
Da Vinci could have taught. Every one of those artists in the Renaissance, all were mathematicians.
Right.
Every single one of them. From Borromini to Da Vinci to Michelangelo, any one of them. They knew, you're a mathematician. You don't even know it. You look, I watch you draw. You're drawing mechanical drawing. But then you're adding, Brian Huntress onto it.
Right.
You're adding your emotion onto it.
Interesting.
And that's the part, that's the part the kids need. So if Michelle Wu is going to change this city, she's got to change the education. We lost that opportunity with John Connolly when he was running for mayor. We ended up with Marty Walsh. And what did Marty Walsh want to do? Put shovels in the ground because that's making money. It's making money. It's making money for rich people.
Yeah.
Poor people are still poor. They're reaping a little bit of the benefits because Democrats think like Republicans that the fucking money's going to trickle down, but it really doesn't because it just gets more and more wealthy. So we get more and more seaport, and then we start bitching and moaning about diversity, that there's no black people in the seaport. It's like, why is that? Because, you created a dysfunctional education system in the process of putting shovels in the ground. And, the great, great, great thing about, the thing I have to say about going to Catholic schools, that always music and always art were two things, that were always a big part of education. And at least back then when I went, it was important. I mean, you got a certain amount of the day was to music and a certain amount of the day was to art. And then, of course, you had your STEM stuff. But, my daughter now, my granddaughter, she gets on a bus at 8:30, doesn't come home till 4:30.
Oh, wow.
Okay, maybe later. Okay? How much time does she have to play after school? How important is play? We just discussed play for 2 hours.
Yeah.
We play art. That keeps us sane. That keeps us expressing. That keeps us not being one of those people that bailed out and took the Elon Musk job.
Oh, right, yeah.
That kind of shit. She needs to play. She
Yeah.
also needs after-school activities because
Yeah.
she's not getting art in school. She's not getting music in school. But if she comes home at 4:30, close to 5, because she had to take a bus to another part of the city, okay, does she have an opportunity to go to after-school program? Well, maybe, once a week, maybe. And if she can't go to an after-school program, she's not getting the creative part. She's only getting what she's learning in school. And by the time she eats dinner and gets to bed early, it's not much time to be a kid,
Yeah.
And that's what's wrong with the education in this city. It's unfortunate. They haven't solved the problem. They're not even trying to solve the problem, I don't believe. I haven't heard, I haven't heard one thing about education in the last 6 years, 5 years, since John Connolly was, running for mayor. And they don't want to build schools in certain areas. Seaport doesn't have a school. Fort Point doesn't have a school. Beacon Hill doesn't have a school. Now, the Beacon Hill people can deal with it because they send all their kids to private schools.
Yeah.
And then when they, when they're in the 6th grade, the kids from private schools test for Boston Latin School, which is a great school, but, those kids are even more prepared for Boston Latin than Boston public school kids,
Yeah.
who half of them are sleeping because they have to take buses to where they, need to go. We still haven't solved that problem. So there's a lot of fucked up, things about the city. Now, why is the city important? Because like Timbuktu and Rome and Athens and, the great cities, Isfahan, Beijing, Kyoto, the great centers of the world were places where people from different cultures came and exchanged cultural differences. And those cultural differences, when they started to blend, became other languages, other music, other art, other forms of expression, Gypsy dancing became flamenco, So if you lose that, you lose the city.
Yeah.
So there's no more Timbuktu. Nobody even remembers what Timbuktu was, even though it was supposed to be one of the greatest cities of all in the history of humankind.
Wow. That's fucked. This is one of the first episodes we've had in a long time where it was just like, in part, really focused on Boston.
Yeah.
By someone I feel like actually knows a lot about Boston.
I've said, I'm working on my 3rd generation of kids. My kids got bused to school.
Yeah.
And, when my daughter wanted to drop out of her 5th high school, I felt bad about it, but, there's a reason for it. She ended up graduating Brooklyn College with double major, summa cum laude. It wasn't she was a stupid kid. She just wasn't given the opportunity to express herself.
Yeah.
My son had to be bused. That was like a nightmare because he was a hockey player. So not only did he have to get bused, but I had to,
Early
for
practice.
the first time in my life, own a car.
Oh, holy shit.
Even though, I didn't really need a car. But, that was it. Now he's got 2 kids and he's putting them on a bus. And, this is, my daughter's 41, so it's like, that's a lot of years between, neighborhoods not having a school. The last school that there was in the West End was, Beacon Hill was the Peter Faneuil School, closed in 1973. There's not a school there. Now, we're not even talking about, we're just talking about education. We're not talking about parents getting together because of their kids. Like, your parents probably know the parents of kids that you went to school with.
I was homeschooled, actually.
Oh, yeah, that's right, too. I forgot about that.
But yeah, that definitely is
But
true.
even homeschool kids have networks of other
Yeah.
kids that you hang out with.
Yeah.
So it's like, school becomes socialization. Even homeschool has a certain
Yeah, there's a mirror,
expectation
yeah.
of socialization. I used to have a kid that used to volunteer at the museum. He was like 16 years old, homeschooled.
Oh, cool.
And he used to bring his class to, his group.
Yeah.
There was Massachusetts homeschooling that we ended up hooking up with. And one of the places they would come would be to the museum. So they would learn about what urban renewal was, what
that's cool.
urban history was.
Yeah.
And, I think that's one of the advantages of homeschooling is you get to think outside the box,
Yeah.
From your traditional education. Like, today we're going to do art because it's important,
Yeah.
not just because the program got cut back because the people running the school committee don't know how to spend money.
Yeah, it's true. I feel like that was one of the biggest influences growing up for me was just the amount of free time and access I had. Like I would draw for 8 hours a day sometimes just because I could, which was cool. It was
Made you a great
cool.
artist.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I went to public schools throughout my whole childhood, and it was like, I could tell you for definite that I did not learn how to make art at school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know, I don't know.
Well, in Catholic school, making art was propaganda.
Yeah.
Because the whole what's it called? My brain just went dead. But the whole what's the movement? Not Rococo. Before Rococo.
Baroque?
Baroque.
Oh,
So
okay,
the whole
gotcha.
Baroque movement was created by the Inquisition.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Okay, so people like Borromini and Bernini were like the two artists that became, the poster boys for the Baroque movement. And the reason that Baroque became so important was because it was following the Reformation. The Catholic Church started losing its influence.
Soft power, is that what they call that? Right.
And so they started designing buildings. Like if you look at buildings in Rome, look like buildings all throughout South America.
Oh, yeah.
All the mission buildings, all the cathedrals in Mexico and South America all look like the buildings in Rome because they're all Baroque style buildings that look like Borromini buildings.
Yeah.
And Borromini is, what's his name, Frank Gehry's favorite architect, because he was also a brilliant mathematician, Borromini, but he never got to be the architect of the Vatican. It was Bernini who became the architect of the Vatican, even though Bernini wasn't on the level of Borromini.
Yeah.
But there was vibrancy and competition to create this propaganda for the church, which ended up being, very influential worldwide. It kind of gave the Catholic Church its sort of one-upmanship on, the Protestants.
Yeah, Martin Luther.
Yep.
That is such an interesting I've never thought about it like that in terms of propaganda and almost this Cold War between the two religions or the two
Yeah, I got a
denominations.
great book. I'll let you borrow it.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, because and you could even feel the ripples of that now and a lot of, I know a lot of people. I didn't know that you went to a Catholic school, but that's something I even find I wonder if I'm even a kind of a product of that same kind of Catholic propaganda that they've been or were tried to create, because I feel like I am greatly influenced by my Catholic upbringing and all of the imagery from the church and the history and stuff. That's one of my favorite things to study and think about.
Yeah, you're probably influenced by it. I think, I call my daughter, I tell her, you're giving me Jewish guilt, because my ex-wife is Jewish. And, my daughter's always seemed to have been, around that element, and I think that some of our cultural, some of our culture, our family culture comes through in our work, but with Catholic school, it was even more ingrained because, you were sort of given the Jesus, in the manger to draw every Christmas, or color every Christmas. It would start out by coloring when you were a little kid, and then you're drawing it, and then, you're told why you can't draw penises on, devils and that kind of thing. With the stuff that we were drawing, I was in and out of Catholic and public school, so I know, I probably should have been homeschooled. I had a lot of influence. I had a lot of positive influence on other institutions. Like I was in the 4-H, so I had a lot of influence in our 4-H club was a garden club.
Yeah.
So I learned about germination. I learned about planting. I learned about growing food. I learned about how to grow food organically, how to introduce the right bugs and the wrong bugs and weeding and all this stuff, So, that to me was probably more influential, I think, than school itself, even though, school reinforced it because I was a bio major, so I learned all that stuff. And then, at UMass, I had a professor, Garrison Wilkes, who was on the World Health Organization, and he was like a genetic consultant. And he was a farm boy, so we shared a lot, I took a lot of courses with him, but with regard to what you were indoctrinated, like when I was in public school, we could draw the devils with the bloodshot eyes and, guns and shooting each other, but you could never get away with that in Catholic school. If the nuns saw you with artwork like that, they would pull it off your desk, tear it up, and throw it in the bucket. Oh. You'd never see it again, ever.
Did they hit you too at the time?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah. That
was definitely a generational thing.
When I got confirmation, I was in public school, but I had been in Catholic school until third grade. Then, halfway through my third grade, we moved. Third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, then sixth grade, you get confirmation. So I remember being in a room with all these public school kids, and there was nuns who were teaching what you're supposed to do to get confirmation. And there was this one kid, Greavy, who he had red hair, long red hair, and he did something, and I'm just I'm behind him, and I'm shaking my head. He just did the wrong thing. The nun comes marching down, grabs him by the hair, hits him across the face this way, and then hits him with a backhand across that way.
Holy shit.
And it was just so funny because I know that stuff happened because I had known it happened from first, second, and third grade.
Yeah.
Because I had seen it happen, But kids who were in public schools never seen anything like that because they didn't hit kids in public school. So then when I got to high school, it was completely different. I had Polish nuns for 2 years, and then I was in high school. Polish nuns were they were okay. We used to call them penguins and make fun of them.
And so at the public school, the kids beat each other.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah. Peer shaming.
Right.
I went through all of that in high school. That was ridiculous.
In homeschool, the moms fight each other, so.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I'm kidding, but only kind of.
Wow. Damn, we're at 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Yeah, shit, really?
Yeah, this is we got a lot out of this. So I feel like I could keep going for 2 more hours, but my feet are in so much fucking pain.
That's what you get for being a skateboarder.
That's true. I was skating this
you're young,
earlier today.
when you're old.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. Well, hey, that was a fucking awesome interview. Is there anything we could say that, I don't know, I guess I could add plugs and shit about the show to the beginning of the episode, but I guess to learn more about you, they should go to galleryeast.com or
galleryeastnetwork.com or go to 4pointarts.org. You'll find me either place. or if you want to call me up on the phone, 617-416-0718.
Fuck yeah.
Love to talk to people and, not afraid to tell it like it is.
Call Duane.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, fuck yeah. Thank you all for listening, and goodbye. Great.